Okay, it's very nice to meet you, Director Anna. And we are the organization called 희망래일. In English is Whale Hope, and we are aiming to connect and interact as much as possible with North Korea to build the better future between not two countries, but technically, yeah. So, yeah, and yeah, it's thank you for having this interview with us, and we will talk about the movie Aim High in Creation, right? Okay.
I was born in Japan because of my parents' work and then grew up in various countries, Philippines, Burma, Iran, a little bit in Vietnam, but mostly by then I was just visiting my parents. I never grew up in Korea. But
Okay.
certainly I then graduated from high school in Japan, and that experience of being an outsider in every culture that I lived in as a child made me very interested in observing cultures and in trying to understand the people I was meeting and form connections through understanding, right? So I guess that experience as a child, when I became an adult and started to make films, it was really a natural default way of looking at the world to be an observer. And the other thing that I was very struck by when I started to make my first film in 1995 was it was called Hell Bento. It was about the Japanese cultural underground, Angura no Shakai. So Yakuza 5678, Bosozoku, Otaku, all these subculture movements in Japan that no one in the West knew about. And I guess my other passion, as well as observing, is to try and explode cliches that Western audiences have about other cultures, particularly different cultures in the continent known as Asia, within which, of course, there are so many different, radically different places and countries. And that has been a through line in my work to look at what mainstream media is saying, especially in the West, and then to make my own investigation to find out where the truth is. And I often find the truth is not exactly what the Western media is telling us. So you're right. That is definitely one reason I wanted to go to North Korea and make a film there about North Korean filmmakers and filmmaking. The film that I had made before Aim High in Creation was a film about a con artist in Chicago called Forbidden Lies. And I made that at the time that the American military industrial complex and their allies invaded Iraq after 9/11. Okay. And at
Mm-hmm.
that time, the President George W. Bush was talking about the axis of evil. And the
Hmm.
three countries in the axis of evil were Iran, North Korea, and I believe at the time Iraq. I could be wrong. So I was always fascinated, if someone's going to go to that extent, the so-called most powerful nation on earth is going to decide to talk about a country as inherently evil, that already kind of set off alarm bells for me because I was thinking, okay, but what about the people who live there? Through no choice of their own, they happen to live there. Secondly, at the time, North Korea was known as the most isolated nation on earth. Its citizens had grown up without the internet. To me, this was fascinating. What would people be like? This is like a living social experiment. What would people
Hmm.
who have grown up without the internet, without Facebook, without gaming, without any of that stuff, what would they be like? What would their lifestyles be like? And the third thing was Kim Jong-il at the time was a pop culture icon in the West. So we had films made by South Park that made fun of Kim Jong-il. We had a lot of things on YouTube like Hulk Hogan versus Kim Jong-il. North Korea was like this fantasy land that in the West was almost like this figure of pop culture fun, right? So it was almost like by George Bush saying, hey, it's part of the axis of evil, it gave permission for everyone, including the mainstream media, to publish whatever they wanted about North Korea. So I was intrigued about North Korea. Okay. I mean, if someone's going to tell me you can't go there, I'm going to try and go. And I'm going to try and find out again, like my first film that I made a long time ago. And I was really worried about this gas mine. And I was trying to work out what kind of film can I make to help people in Australia stop this gas mine. At the same time, a journalist friend of mine came back from North Korea. She was working with the ABC and she gave me a funny little present. She thought it was funny. She'd got it in the hotel where she was staying in Pyongyang at the Yanggakdo Hotel. And it was a little book called The Cinema and Directing by Kim Jong-il.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it was called the cinema well, it was the chapter from the book, the big book, about the art of directing. And I read it. And on the first page, he's talking about the true goal of socialist filmmaking is to make the people, give them the permission and inspiration to rise up against the enemy. And the enemy are people who want to exploit the people, right? And I thought, this is so crazy, it might just work. What if, to stop the gas mine in Sydney, I made a North Korean style propaganda film? That would bring in Western audiences because Western audiences were fascinated at the time by North Korea. It would also, at the same time, maybe give me a chance to go to North Korea because I could say to the North Koreans, I don't want to make a film about you and your politics. I want to make a film about your filmmaking. And it took me 2 years, but you guys may know this, you may not. North Korea has always had a policy of cultural diplomacy, building bridges. And they have had many cultural exchanges over the years with artists from all over Europe and other countries, certainly China.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Definitely not South Korea, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me 2 years, but basically I ended up getting permission
Mm-hmm.
to make the film from a fixer in Beijing who ran tours to North Korea many times a year through a
Mm-hmm.
company called Koryo Tours. And I
Mm-hmm.
said to him, I don't want to go in there like every other Western journalist and pretend I'm doing one thing and then come out and say this is an evil regime. I really do want to go in there. I really want to meet their filmmakers and I just want to ask them about their films. That's all I
Mm-hmm.
want to do. And he said,
Mm-hmm.
no one else has done that. And I said, and not only that, I want them to teach me how to make a film in their style because North Korean filmmaking was very different to anywhere else, especially in South Korea. I mean, South Korea leads the world, Hallyu and
Mm-hmm.
South Korean wave and you guys are absolute pioneers in digital, whereas North Korean filmmakers were still analog. They're still
Mm-hmm.
making films on 35 mil. And this fascinated me. So I said to him, Nick, I want to go in there. I want them to teach me how to make a film in their style. And in the process, I want to create some kind of cultural dialogue. And he said, I will back you. And he introduced me to his production manager in North Korea. I went there with my producer. We drank with the filmmakers. They decided they liked us. And then we went back again and made the film. And I had the full permission of the North Korean regime to make this film.
Mm-hmm.
There was a practical reason, which is
Mm-hmm.
that I could not take my actors to North Korea because
Mm-hmm.
my actors are Australian. It would have been too hard, and I couldn't take my North Korean teachers to Australia. So I was the go-between, or my laptop was the go-between. And the laptop is like a frame, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
through that frame, it was like a window into another world. The North Korean
Mm-hmm.
filmmakers to talk to my actors, and my actors could talk to the North Korean filmmakers. But also, there's a kind of formal aesthetic by then taking that frame and
Mm-hmm.
putting it as an actual picture frame. Because if you think about it, if you want to play with metaphor, um,
Mm-hmm.
filmmakers are framing reality always.
Mm-hmm.
And so are propagandists. And
Mm-hmm.
so are people who deal in the language of power. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess the other reason is perhaps symbolic or thematic, which is that I'm also
Mm-hmm.
playing with going through the looking glass, a frame within a frame. These are all pictures, these are all constructs. And,
Mm-hmm.
I also, I guess, I wanted to, I find I didn't want to just go, okay, I'll have a North Korean filmmaker say, I'm going to talk about the film I made, and then we cut to the film. I wanted to be more
Mhm,
interesting than that. So if I got them to hold a
mhm,
frame with green screen on it, I can then put the North Korean film in that frame. And that means that if the quality of the North Korean film is not very good, and a lot of it wasn't, it was low res because I was playing off DVDs, then a smaller frame within a high def film doesn't look as bad, right? So I can
mhm,
keep the frame
mhm,
small and it
mhm,
will
mhm,
still look good. But
mhm,
I mean, to me, it's a construct, sure, it's a construct. But why I like it is that wonderful moment when Park Chung-ju, I'm getting him to hold it, and he's going,
mhm,
Anna, you're
mhm.
not going to use this to advertise Western products, are you?
Right, 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 right,
And what I
right.
love about that was that it was that cultural, cross-cultural, lost in translation moment where suddenly he said, hey, we're smarter than you think. We
Mhm.
understand about green screen. Or that
Yeah, we
time,
are not living on the moon, right?
yeah, do you
Yeah,
think we're living on the moon? I mean,
yeah,
those
yeah.
moments to me, they justify the whole 90 or 100 minutes of the film because what that little moment does is it forms a connection with Western audiences where suddenly they go, oh my God, they're like us. They crack the same jokes, they have the same ideas, they are suspicious as well. Whatever it is, it forms a connection and it's
Mhm,
human.
mhm,
And it's not what the geopolitical forces want us to think. It's actually a very human connection, which I think is
mhm,
very, very, very important if we want to stop, if we want to form diplomatic solutions to conflict rather than military solutions. Yeah.
mhm.
We had half an hour to show them the
Uh-huh.
short film. I
Mhm,
I wasn't in North Korea. I'd finished the film in Sydney. I sent them through the go-between, Nick Bonner, the guy
mhm,
that helped
mhm,
get me into North Korea. He
mhm,
filmed that scene.
mhm.
So he had a very short time. There was no discussion. The
No, okay.
filmmakers were
Yeah.
brought in, they watched the
Uh-huh.
film, and apparently, according to Nick, they weren't given time to properly talk afterwards on
Uh-huh.
camera. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
pretty much that's the only reaction on
Okay.
camera. But I did ask him off camera. I said, "Listen, how were they?" And he said, "Yeah, yeah, no, they were touched. They were always touched that I
Mhm,
had bothered to do it because they knew they were embarrassed about their film industry. They knew that North Korean filmmaking was nowhere near as sophisticated as South Korean filmmaking. The techniques, the stories, everything, right? So they
mhm,
felt very embarrassed in a way. And they
mhm,
were also secretly really grateful, I think, or honored that someone would
mhm,
bother to want
mhm,
to also understand what they do. And when I did start to talk to them about their filmmaking techniques, they know a lot about celluloid. They knew a lot
mhm,
about techniques that we now don't use anymore
mhm,
to do with.
mhm,
But anyway, um, look, I know that that short film is no good. It's not a
mhm,
good film. It's in your face. It's ham-fisted. It's the music's not great. The acting's a bit wooden. The writing's not great. Um, but I think they saw through that. I think what they were really what I don't think they were really looking at that short film. I think they were remembering the experience that we had together, which not wouldn't have happened if I hadn't wanted to make that film. And I feel really humbled and touched that who knows? Maybe they hated it, but they couldn't say anything because there were minders in the room. I really don't know.
Yeah, but
I like to think that they didn't hate it. Art house cinemas in Australia.
okay.
It was bought by Netflix. Netflix
Uh-huh.
played it
Uh-huh.
for a while.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about Aim High in Creation is its biggest audience was
Uh-huh.
in Russia.
Oh,
They
really?
they loved it because it made them
Okay.
nostalgic about their childhoods and also
Uh-huh.
Europe. So it actually played really well all over Europe and Russia.
Uh,
And in fact,
uh,
I remember at Rotterdam Film Festival, they played it, but then they also invited all the audience to then make North Korean films, and they had a
uh,
competition.
Uh-huh.
Funny enough, it also did play in America. Very, very
Mhm.
limited release in San Francisco. But
Mhm.
what's been interesting about this film, right, is it
Mhm.
didn't set the world on fire when it came out. But here I am talking to you. People keep playing this film. So even
Mhm.
in 2016, I was playing Aim High in Creation in Yale University and Princeton
Ah,
University
okay.
on the
Yeah.
in the month that Donald Trump got elected. And then I think in 2018, 19, it got played in Seoul through a very small release in Seoul.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So they were
Uh-huh.
fascinated.
Uh-huh.
And they were very moved by meeting
Uh-huh.
the filmmakers on, they only met them on my laptop, but each of
Uh-huh.
them asked questions. I would say to each actor, what are the 5 questions you want me to ask them when I go over? And the actor would
Mm.
record the questions onto my camera. I would then play those questions back to the filmmakers and the actors in North Korea, and they would reply. So my camera became like a conduit, yeah?
Mhm.
Or the laptop did. But yeah, no, they were. Uh, I think actors by default, because of their profession, are trained
Mhm.
to be sensitive to difference, diversity, and
Mhm.
humanness, and what is it to be human in creating
Mhm.
a character. And so I think that
Mhm.
actors, unlike people in other professions, were probably much more open to being
Mhm.
non-judgmental and just trying to
Mhm.
understand it. This is not to say that some of my actors didn't have very hardline views that were very anti-North Korean, as is fine.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Mhm.
but on a human level, I think that they were amazed at how polite and generous and sweet and kind,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
North Korean mentors were with them. So the coal seam gas mine that was proposed for Sydney Park, all they were doing was exploration. And they decided not to do it, not because of my film. They
Uh-huh.
decided not to do it because there were so many protests about, you've got to be kidding.
Uh-huh.
Like the community rose up and
Uh-huh.
said, you can't do this where we
Uh-huh.
live, right? But at the
Uh-huh.
same
Uh-huh.
time, even now, it is such a lucrative industry for
Uh-huh.
corporations and government that we
Yeah.
continue to have it in our country, although our government is now trying to phase out coal seam gas and also coal. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
no, my film had nothing to do with any of that. I wish it had, but no, I cannot say that it did. Cinema is very powerful. It changes how we
Right.
think and feel about the world. Kim Il Sung
Right.
knew this, Lenin knew this. Certainly, big corporate advertising houses know this. The
Uh-huh.
audiovisual medium at this time
Uh-huh.
in an AI post-truth social media age is even more powerful than it used to be,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Than it used to be in Kim Jong-il's heyday, right?
Right. Right.
Not only that,
Mhm.
the gold standard of truth, which is the audio visual recording, no longer exists.
Mhm.
Because of AI,
Mm.
everything can be faked, right?
Right. Right.
So in my films, I've always been interested in deception and truth
Mhm.
and in
Mhm.
humanity,
Mhm.
uh, and in the power of humor as a subversive weapon against oppression. And so my
Mhm.
next
Mhm.
film, hopefully, I don't know if it'll happen,
Mhm.
but my next film is a sci-fi documentary
Mhm.
using deepfakes.
How can a spy be a documentary because it's not happened?
Good,
You know
good
what I mean?
question.
Yeah.
No, no, okay. I'll be
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
specific and very,
Right.
very good. You get 10 out of 10. Sci-fi mockumentary. What I'm trying to say is that movies, cinema movies used to be powerful. We know that. We know that in the
Mhm.
20th
Mhm. Mhm.
century, so many countries have
Mhm.
tried to censor movies, yeah, because they know they're powerful. And even in the 21st century, filmmakers are being censored. You know, there are filmmakers from Iran that
Mm-hmm.
get censored, or there are
Right.
filmmakers in the West that get censored by being buried, right? They get put on channels you can never see them, or they get denied a cinema release. What I'm trying to say is that
Right.
we already knew that was powerful, but AI has
Uh-huh.
made audio visual media even more powerful because now it is
Mm-hmm.
believable even when it's fake. So we don't even
Mm-hmm.
know anymore the difference. We used to know,
Mm-hmm.
don't know now. So to me, it's the most
Yeah,
important
I get it.
time of all, the most important time of all to be trying to work in this audio-visual communication from a team human perspective rather than a tech
Mm-hmm.
kind of AI propaganda perspective. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm really interested to see what the younger generation of filmmakers is going to do in the future now that we're in a post-truth world.
So
And
that,
you know what?
yeah.
You know what I think is going to
Mm.
happen? I'm really interested in this. I think filmmakers will go back to using analog
Mm-hmm.
technology because it's the only
Uh-huh.
way
Yeah.
that you can prove, even exhibiting on analog projectors, because it's the only way you can say
Right.
this is actually real. It's not AI.
Right. With
Thank
those things.
you. I just want to say to your viewers, thank you very much for watching this film, and also to you, Rail Link. Is that the
Mm-hmm.
right name? But thank you very much for screening the film, and I hope that your viewers get something out of it. And we're very honored. Thank you, because we're in Australia. We don't claim to know anything really about South Korea or North Korea. We just happen to get involved in it. So thank you very much, and I hope it's
Mm-hmm.
helpful.